It was the 1968. It was the height of Dr. King's civil rights movement. I was an idealistic college freshman, about 19, and I was enrolled in a small all women's Catholic college. Having grown up in Jim Crow era, I was already made aware of racial injustice. I was made aware of that by my mother, who actively taught in the home through open discussion, encouraging us that we read books and read periodicals, and emphasizing that we just become educated and involved in thought and ponderance, if not in action.
How did you respond to injustice?
I had personal observations and experiences. The obvious signs of segregation, the separation of the races in public places like buses and restaurants. And we also had limited access to places of recreation like movies and parks, the fairgrounds, which now you just know as the fair, and to the zoo. As a matter of fact, on fairground days, if you were black, you could only go to the fair on maybe Wednesday. If you wanted to go to the zoo, blacks could only be allowed in the zoo on Tuesday, which was the day that they cleaned the animal cages, so you really didn't get to see much of the animals. My mother didn't allow us to even frequent the zoo or the fairgrounds because of those restrictions. So that in itself made you aware. That was an awareness. At the time, I was young and didn't react much because it was the norm. I had grown up like that. As I became older and more sophisticated in my thinking, I chose a college to integrate. It was Siena College, which was an all girls Catholic college. I had been raised in Catholic schools all my life, from first grade to 12th grade at St. Augustine, which was an all black Catholic school. And so I chose Siena. And Siena had a consortium with CBC, Christian Brothers College, which is now Christian Brothers University. There I joined the Black student organizations and I voiced my opinions in meetings and with administration.
Um, what made you decide to act against injustice you saw?
Well, it was a natural involvement based on the observations and teachings and experiences. It was a time of protest and revolution, especially on the college campuses. Um, I want to tell you a story about how during Jim Crow you could become so aware, even as a child. I remember once, and this sticks in my head, I just can't believe it at my age that this still is there so strongly. But at St. Augustine School, we got on a bus. I was like 6 years old, and we had to ride the bus. So of course, on the buses you had the signs colored in white. Colored had to be in the back, and white had to be in the front. Well, before our stop, all of the students from Booker T. Washington High School boarded before they even got to us. So the bus was standing room only and it was packed full. And I got on with my sister, and there was no room to move any place. There were only two white people on the bus, an elderly couple, a man and his wife, and they were sitting on the one long seat before you get to the short seats. I don't know if he was just frightened because he was very old. I remember he had a cane. And I don't know if he was frightened or just hateful, but because the bus was so packed, from time to time, I would be pushed against him and I would touch him. And finally, he just, out of nowhere, took his fist and rammed it into my stomach and told me to get back there in the back where I belong. And I was stunned. I was confused and I was hurt and I was stunned and I just didn't know what to think. I think there were tears, but I didn't really cry. But the students on the bus raised such a ruckus, the black students that were standing up. And they couldn't get up there close to us, but they saw what happened and it rippled to the back. And finally, his wife, or whoever the elderly old white woman was with him, pulled the cord and they got off at the next stop. But those things, when you're little bitty, I was 6 and I was teeny tiny, and those things stick in your head. You don't really understand, but those were the kinds of experiences that you were apt to have.
So what were the consequences of like your actions?
Well, consequently, I joined Dr. King's movement that first year toward the end of my freshman year. I joined Dr. King's movement when he came to Memphis to support the sanitation workers' strike. They were striking for dignity and respect and justice. And by this time, my thoughts were pretty evolved and pretty sophisticated. I knew that this was an injustice. I knew that it was wrong. I was ready to fight. I'm always up for a fight. So I was ready to do something about it. Um, it, of course, it all culminated with Dr. King's assassination on April 4th, 1968. We had already had several marches. We had already had meetings in various and sundry places. And I remember the moment and the place and exactly what I was doing when I got the news. I was at my friend's house, and I was the only one in her house. They were all off somewhere, and I was there because I needed to type a term paper. And she had a typewriter, and I didn't. So I was typing my term paper, and the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and it was my mother. And she was sobbing and crying, which I didn't hear often if I ever had heard it before. And she told me that they shot Dr. King. This is about to make me cry. This is an emotional thing. She said they shot Dr. King, and I don't think at the time they knew that he was dead. But it was shortly thereafter that we got the news, and it was just devastating. It devastated the entire community, and the aftermath is common knowledge for everybody.
That's it. Thank you, Nana. Oh, there's more.
But after Dr. King's assassination and after my graduation, I still remained active through the Operation Push organization, which was founded by Jesse Jackson, who was one of Dr. King's staunchest soldiers. Everybody knows that. He founded the Operation Push, which the acronym is for People United to Save Humanity, and he referred to it as his Rainbow Coalition. It grew out of Dr. King's Operation Breadbasket program in Chicago, and the goals of Operation Push were economic empowerment of black people and the justice, equality for people of all races. And I joined that. I became the first. Uh, I became a charter member, and I became the first secretary of education for them. And that was the carry on after Dr. King's death. That was how one of the ways that the movement was carried on. The Operation Push started in Chicago, but there was like a branch of it started in Memphis in Reverend Kyle's church. Reverend Kyle's was close friends with Dr. King and with Jesse Jackson. As a matter of fact, I used to babysit for Reverend Kyle's children. I was a nanny of sort when they would leave. And I do know that on that day, when Dr. King was shot on that balcony, he was talking to Reverend Kyle's, who was below him in the parking lot, because they had planned to go to Reverend Kyle's home for dinner. I know what they were having. They were having chitlins for dinner, and that's what he wanted. And when he was talking to Reverend Kyle's in the parking lot, that's when the shots rang out. So they were very close, and I, the Operation Push when it came to Memphis was housed in Monumental Baptist Church, which was Reverend Kyle's church, and I was a member of the Operation Push, but I also was directing the daycare center there at the church.
Thank you, Nana.
You're welcome, Molly.